something that says thinking ahead. Can we see it? Okay, awesome. Thank you. I do this like 20 times a day, but I still just always have to check. So I do want to thank Queenie for having me back here today, for inviting me to run this workshop. I did something similar last year. There's a few different things. And I'm really excited to meet all of you. I hope that at some point you share a thought or ask a question so I can hear a little bit from you. And I hope by the end of the workshop, I have gotten you thinking about, the ways that you can help, things to help you decide what kind of post-secondary education training or further learning might be right for you. And, some of the places that you can get assistance and help to start making that plan. So like Queenie said, I'm Laura. So I'm from Ottawa originally. I lived in Toronto for like 16-ish years. And actually I live in Hamilton now. I moved last year. And when I worked at OLI, like she said, I had the same job as Queenie has now. But then I left OLI for a job at Ryerson University, and I work in the career center there. So that means that in my job, I specifically help students who are studying things like sociology, English, history, and psychology figure out what careers might be right for them, and then how to actually look for work. And so my title is Career Education Specialist. I basically help university students find jobs and figure out how they can take their skills and their interests and turn that into a career. So for today, though, I'm going to be talking about lots of different kinds of post-secondary education training and learning, meaning any kind of learning and training you do after high school. So I work at a university, but we're definitely not talking only about university. It's only one way, to continue learning after high school. And let me just make sure I have the chat open. Sorry about that. I just want to have it on the side.
I'll also let you know in case like someone messages.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I can only juggle so many windows on my two screens. Okay, so I wanted to start with actually some facts about myself that do lead into a point I wanted to make about jobs and careers. So I've had about 13 different jobs since I started working around the age of 18, and I've held a lot of different job titles. So at different times in my life, I was a dancer, I was an artist educator, a tutor, I was a teacher, I was a program manager at OLI, and now I'm a career education specialist. So I've done a lot of different things. They're all connected in some way. They all have education as a thread running through them, but I've held a lot of different job titles. And I've also changed fields, meaning sort of the category of work, at least 4 times. So I started out in the performing arts, then I moved to arts education, then I moved to leadership development, and then career education. And I wanted to share this right off the bat to let you know that it is totally normal and expected that you'll change jobs during your life. You might even change industries completely. And so, you are going to continue to grow and learn and change. And so don't feel that the plan you make now, maybe with future leaders, is what you have to do for the whole rest of your life. You want to think about, what do I want to do right after high school? What feels good and right for me now? But know that you're going to learn things that will change your plan and change your direction, and that's completely normal. So do keep that in mind as we talk about post-secondary options. And if ever you wanted to talk to me about my career and ask more questions about all the things I've done, happy to do that. But I just wanted to introduce this as an idea that it is very normal to change jobs, and you're not ever trapping yourself. You always have a chance to change directions and, learn different things as you yourself change and grow. So I have a quick opening question for you, and you can just, again, pop your answers into the chat or talk over the mic. What are some reasons that you might want to pursue further education or training after high school? Anyone in the room have any thoughts on why, like, you personally might want to pursue further education or further learning after high school?
Better opportunities.
Yeah, better opportunities. Thank you. Oh, a cat. Focus, Laura. Anyone else? Yes, you can definitely type your answers in the chat if you want to. Okay, better part. For sure. It puts you in a different financial situation, right? If you're able to get a better job, it allows you to buy things that might make your life more comfortable. All right, I'm going to keep going. you have ideas, pop them in the chat, but I am going to move on to sort of building a bit on this idea. So we are sort of deciding together that post-secondary education is important. It is important to keep learning and pursuing training or different kinds of education after high school for a bunch of different reasons. So first of all, just for your own personal development, you'll build important life skills like time management, leadership, critical thinking, communication. It'll be a chance to expand your horizons. You'll build new relationships, and it will help you sort of embrace that lifelong learning. Oh, yes, to pass info down my lineage. Thanks for that in the chat. Another reason you might want to pursue post-secondary education is to pursue your interests and passions further, right? High school, you have to do a lot of different subjects. Post-secondary can be a chance to hone in on something you really feel passionate about. And more education can help you discover your strengths, learn more about topics that interest you, and give you a chance to learn and work on things that are meaningful to you in a more focused way than you might get to in high school. Of course, it's a chance to support your family and your community. People with more education typically have better paying jobs and more skills and resources to support their community and their family. If any of these resonate with you, you can also pop them in the chat if they feel like, oh, those are reasons that would be important to me. Some other reasons, generally better health and happiness, better paying, meaningful jobs can help lower stress and support your overall well-being and the well-being of your family. It's a chance to also to sort of feel that sense of accomplishment, which you might have felt, during, at school at some point, or during OLI, or during a personal project or something in your community. But each time you complete an assignment or you work towards a goal, you'll feel pride in your hard work and talents. And then something else, just to be kind of practical about it, in the next 10 years and certainly further on in the future, the vast majority of jobs that will be available, and especially newly created jobs, will require some kind of additional post-secondary education or training to access, those better paying jobs. So that's sort of a practical thing to think about too. So those are some of the reasons why it can be really beneficial to pursue further education or training. But of course, you have to think about what training option might be right for you. And you need to start with self-reflection, which is something I know that you've been doing in OLI. So in terms of some of the self-reflection exercises you've already done, what's an example of something you've learned about yourself? So I know you've been working on assignments with Queenie. I'm familiar with some of these assignments. What is something, and you can just, again, put this in the chat if that's comfortable for you. What's something you've learned about yourself through any of the exercises and assignments you've done with Future Leaders?
I learn better with music.
Okay, you learn better with music. That's interesting. So maybe there's a little bit of like an auditory learner quality, or you basically need something to help you focus, which is something really good to know about yourself. Okay, you procrastinate. That is something important to know about yourself and something sort of to work on. Anyone else? What else is something you've learned about yourself through your Future Leaders activities? Okay, so maybe some specific interests. You're good at writing. That's awesome. Being, building an awareness of your own skills is really important actually in figuring out what kind of education program might be good for you. Because depending on the program, maybe you want to choose one where you get to use your skill and strength in writing. Thanks for sharing that. So let's get a little bit into some of the things you really should be thinking about and self-reflecting on when it comes to choosing post-secondary education or training. So you want to start by thinking about who you are, what you may want for your future, and then your current responsibilities and some other factors that may influence your decision-making. So for example, we sort of talked about this. How do you learn best? What's your learning style? What environments have you at your best? Some of you might have future career goals, in which case, what types of jobs are you interested in? If you don't have future career goals, that's totally fine. You can still choose a training program based on current interests and your learning skills. Of course, your interests, what activities or topics, academic subjects, ideas, or activities are you interested in and want to pursue further? Of course, location matters. Do you want to stay close to home? Are you willing to travel somewhere? Do you want to study in person, or are you good with online learning? And of course, your personal responsibilities. So what are you responsible for in your family and in your community that may influence, where and when you might decide to continue studying? And then of course, cost. How will you pay for this? What kind of funding and support is available for you? And again, you don't have to think about all of these things at once. This is the kind of thing where I'm going to present a bunch of ideas and I'll probably want to go back to it, over time. And then you also want to think about what will your experience be in the education program. So for example, maybe, Caden wants to find a program where he gets to, where they get to showcase their learning using writing skills. That's, the kind of thing I mean when I talk about experience. So different programs and schools have different teaching styles and different student experiences. So you want to consider some of the factors to figure out what program might be right for you. So teaching style, are the classes taught lecture style in a huge room where the teacher just talks and you have to take notes? Or is it more hands-on practice? Are the classes big or are they small? You might want to think about the kind of support you can get. If you need help with your work, are there people to talk to about that? You might want to think about cultural and well-being support. Are there Indigenous student groups? Are there Indigenous student services? Are you able to access mental health support, through the program that you're interested in? You may also want to think about social activities, meeting people, what kinds of clubs or activities or other social things may be available to you. And then, of course, the length of the program. How long do you want to study? Are you looking to study for 4 years, or are you looking to do a 3-month program that will help, direct you into a job? What seems like a reasonable plan for you according to, who you are and what you might want to do afterwards? And then the last thing you want to think about is, will this program support you in finding a job? Lots of education training programs actually have built-in job search support. So basically, when you're done training, they will help you find a job. So it's good to know if, in advance, if you'll have that kind of help. So we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about one of the elements that I suggested you include in your self-reflection, which is learning style. So every post-secondary education and training program has a different teaching style and student experience. And so it's important to know what kind of environments have you at your best. And I know learning styles is something you've probably explored a bit in Future Leaders. So I chose that example. So an example of doing some reflection on your learning style might sound like, I learn best when I can learn through hands-on practice, or maybe it's you learn best when it's through interaction and talking with people. Maybe you like to learn independently on your own. Maybe you like to learn through reading and writing. Maybe you like to learn through seeing and observing and watching people. Or maybe you like to learn in a very structured environment where you know what's happening, each hour of the day, 5 days a week. And so it's important to think about these aspects of yourself and use an opportunity like Future Leaders to be able to answer some of these questions, so that when you're looking at a program, you sort of know, okay, I think I would excel in this, or no, I think this might not be right for me. I'm just going to pause here before we talk about some of the sort of specific programs that are available. We talk about some of the differences between university and college and apprenticeships. Does anyone have any questions? Comments? Concerns? Queenie, if there's anything that you wanted to jump in with also that has to do with Future Leader stuff, obviously feel free to as well.
You're actually like covering everything. So good. So far, so good. Thanks, Laura.
Okay, awesome. I know this is a lot to take in, but basically, up until this point, we've talked about why education and training is important. Think about why it's important to you, what you hope it brings to your life and your family and your community. Then we talked about knowing yourself. What is your learning style? Where do you thrive? What kind of support do you need? And use that information when you're looking at different programs to say, do I see myself here or not? And so then the next piece is, of course, to learn a little bit about the differences between different kinds of education and training programs. So in terms of just different places you can go for education after high school, what are ones that you know of? Where can you go to get further education or training? Graduated high school. Where can you go? In the chat or over the mic are both fine. Okay, so you'd like to go to a city. So traveling is for sure an option. And so if you would like to study in a city, that's one of those things I talked about, right? Location, that's a consideration. What kinds of different, so thinking about location, whether you want to stay to learn in your community or, go outside your community, what about different types of schools? Anyone else know if you wanted to, start more of a formal program where you might go to do further learning? And if not, that's okay too. I'll just give it 30 more seconds of thinking time.
I kind of zoned out there. What are we talking about again?
So I was just curious, what kinds of different education or training programs do you know about that you could do after high school? Like where could you go to do further learning or training for a job?
New York.
Okay, so those are places. Can anyone name
New
any?
York.
Okay, a music school or a martial arts school, maybe police academy. Awesome. So these are, sort of opportunities to study specific topics. Police academy would be a program called Police Foundations, which is typically at college. Music, we'll talk about this after. You can study music through specialized programs. You could study at university, you can study in college. Martial arts is like private academies as well. That's awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to share a few that I wanted to bring forward. And so mine are not necessarily places. They are what are called, I guess, different kinds of institutions or different kinds of schools, essentially, schools and training programs. So one big category is, of course, university. So you might have heard, yes, this is a take notes time if you'd like to. I know there's a lot of text on the screen. I'll still talk you through it, but something to revisit later. So those of you, if you're in Manitoba, some people I know go to the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. There's obviously universities all over the country that offer different programs. And one of the biggest reasons to go to university is that it allows you to explore a very specific subject in a lot of depth. So for example, if you're someone who loves English class and you love reading and writing and thinking about reading and writing and thinking about books and talking about books, English might be an interesting subject for you to study because you would get to do that all the time and take a lot of specialized classes. Typically, university has larger class sizes. So you might be in a room with 100 people in your first year. Typically, these classes get smaller as you get further along in the program, but they do start out with pretty large classes. One of the advantages for people that choose university is you have lots of choice. There's lots of classes and you get to build your own schedule. And there's a lot of independence. So you get to make your own schedule and go to all your classes. Universities have lots of social activities, lots of different clubs. They typically have lots of support for example, every university has like Indigenous student services, Indigenous supports, and then also clubs and activities for literally anything that you might be interested in, like music, for example. Typically, if you're in university, there tends to be a lot of reading and writing involved in that style of learning. If you're doing a more science-based program, there would also be work in a lab as well, but there does tend to be a lot of reading and writing in terms of how you're expected to learn. After university, there's tons of different career options you can pursue, and oftentimes it's good to get help from someone like me in a university career center to help you figure out what you may want to do afterwards. The most common length of the program, and this is where you want to think about how long you want to study, the most common length is 4 years to earn something called a bachelor's degree. So like a bachelor's of music, for example, or a bachelor's of science. And like I said, they're typically 4-year programs. So some examples of programs are history, biology, engineering, social work, psychology, environmental studies, teaching, and law are all things that you can study at a university. Also at the end of this, I'm happy, like if you are wondering like, how could I become this? I'm happy to have that conversation at the end in terms of like, oh, you would want to go to university or you want to go to college. So if you have those questions, definitely we can make time to chat about that. So the next type of school that I wanted to share or talk about is college. So college is another kind of formal education path you can take after high school. And they offer programs that are from 1 year all the way up to 4 years. So there's a big range of the length of time you could choose to study at college. They typically have smaller class sizes. So more like in high school where you might have 30 people, you might have 50 people maybe, but they typically have smaller class sizes. They tend to do a lot more project-based and hands-on learning. So if you are someone who likes to learn by doing and likes experiential activities, college might be an interesting option for you. Because of the smaller class sizes, you might get more individualized attention from the instructors and teachers. So again, if you're someone who likes a lot of support from the teachers, college might be a better option for you. When you're done a college program, you either get a certificate or a diploma typically. And some of the programs are things like business administration, early childhood education, paralegal, web development, and graphic design. So those are some of the bigger or more common programs that you might choose to study in college. And then the last thing on this slide are apprenticeships. So apprenticeships are training for careers in the skilled trades, like becoming an electrician or a carpenter or a plumber or a mechanic. And what's really cool about apprenticeships is that you actually earn money while you study. So when you apply for an apprenticeship, you are essentially put on the job to learn alongside someone who's a master in that field, and you actually are paid for that training period. And so you're learning right away from, with and from experienced workers within that trade. And it's a mix of on the job, but there is still some classroom learning as well. And they sort of vary in the length of time, but they're typically between 2 to 5 years before you are fully certified in whatever trade you've decided to pursue, and then you get a certificate of apprenticeship. And so, like I said, some examples of trades would be electrician, plumber, mechanic, hairstylist, or welder. So that's an interesting option if you are looking into one of those jobs. And you also get paid, while you're training, which can sometimes make the time easier, right? Because you're still able to support yourself and your family while you're training. And then last one on this next slide, which is kind of a mixed bag. There are lots of other ways to keep learning after high school besides just university, college, or apprenticeship. 2 examples are OLI's work study and alumni programs. Those are chances to still build, to build your skills and keep learning, gain college credit, build, relationships and connections. There are also specific training institutes that have sort of shorter programs that lead directly to jobs. There's in Thunder Bay, for example, the Oshki Wenjack Education Institute has lots of shorter term training programs for different kinds of jobs. There might also be in your community, like community-based experiential learning opportunities. So ways to stay in your community and learn as well and build your skills, whether it's a visiting training program or something that is run by one of the sort of agencies in your community. And then there are also a lot of different ways to learn online or as well short certificates in person, like 3 months through employment agencies. So an example in Toronto, there's one called Mizaway Beak. And depending on what you'd like to learn, they offer sort of 3 to 6 month training programs. So there's a lot of different ways that you can pursue education. You don't have to just go to university or just go to college. It's worth taking time to think, where do I excel? How do I like to learn? What kind of time do I want to spend studying? And then really take a look at all the different options that might get you where you're going. I'm just going to pause. Are there any questions about any of this? This might be a good time if you're like, okay, I want to be this thing, or I want to do this kind of training. Where could I go to do that? I'd be happy to answer those kinds of questions. Any questions?
Where can I go to be a fashion designer?
Oh, interesting. A fashion designer. So you can study, I can go back to apprenticeships while I'm just talking about this. So for fashion design, there are a few different ways you can pursue that. There are absolutely programs in college. And there are ones that are more focused on like the trade of learning to sew and actually create clothing. And then there are some that are more focused on like fashion communication. So if you wanted to work in photography, or if you wanted to work more on sort of the publishing kind of side of things. But if you want to actually design and make clothes, college has that. And then some universities actually have that. So for example, Ryerson University has a fashion program where people can go and learn how to design clothes. They make a collection. There's a student fashion show. But I think for the most part, college is what you'd want to look into.
Thank you.
Yeah. Especially because you need specialized equipment, right? So sometimes you want to go to college because you need access to industrial sewing machines, and you need access to all that sort of specialized equipment you might not necessarily have access to if you stayed in your community, right? So sometimes you have to think about what is the stuff that I need to study what I want, and then a lot of colleges and universities would have that specialized equipment to help you sort of learn that. That's a great question. Okay. Oh, there's so many good questions in the chat. Okay, I went back to apprenticeships. If there's questions about apprenticeships, please ask. What about arts or animation? Ooh, good question. So for animation, you can definitely go to college for that. There are programs to learn animation at the college level. There are some university programs, they tend to be more like graphic design and more broad, but if you know that you really want to do a certain kind of animation, I would look into college. So arts is obviously a big category. So depending on if you want to do traditional arts like painting, sculpture, etc., a university fine arts program is a place you can do that. But what's great about college is that if you say pursue an animation diploma in college, they also build in a lot of career training. So they teach you about the animation industry, like how movies and TV shows get made. And the people teaching you in college typically were actually animators themselves and might have worked in that industry. So I would look into college programs. I also, though, there's a lot of free learning you can do online. Like if you go on YouTube and you look up like introduction to animation, or you go to a site like Coursera, which has a lot of free learning opportunities, it's a chance to test it out before you invest in a long program. So you might want to get a sense of, do I actually want to spend 5 days a week for 3 years doing this and learning about this? So sometimes looking online for tutorials or like a free introductory course can be a good way to know, okay, yes, I actually want to do this in more depth, or no, this is just a fun hobby for me. The other thing you can look up too is that a lot of students who go to college and university make vlogs about it. So you can look online, look on YouTube and look up, say university painting program, and then someone might be like, hey, I'm a student in the university painting program, here's my experience. And it's a way to learn a little bit about what that program might have been like for that person as a student. Hairstylist. So yes, hairstylist, it can be an apprenticeship. There are also hairstyling. So there are actually also a whole category of specialty colleges that I didn't talk about. So you can learn like makeup and hairstyling in a specialty, what's called career college. So one example in Ontario is it's called Marca College. They have them across the country though, and you can specifically become a licensed hairstylist. You have to be licensed. It's a trade, just like being an electrician or a welder. And you can learn at a lot of different places. You can learn in college, you can learn from a specific career private college that just teaches like hair and makeup. And then also there are some brands like Aveda that makes shampoo that also has like a hair school. So if you Google like how to become a hairstylist in your province, you'll be able to find information on what kind of program you have to take to become certified. Okay, astronomy. If you'd like to learn astronomy, you would want to go to university most likely. I'm trying to think of like most universities would have some courses. It's not necessarily something you can take a whole degree in, but it might be something you can take as part of like a broader science program, like a general science program. But yeah, typically for astronomy, my inclination would be university is where you could get those kinds of courses. Good questions, everyone. Anyone else have a career of interest?
I got computer science.
Is that Braden?
Oh, I missed that, Braden.
My career interest is career science. computer science.
Oh, computer science. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So, do you know what you'd like to do with computers? Like, do you mean like software development or like web stuff? Like, do you have a sense of what with computers you might like to do?
Software that software. Actually, it's called.
Software development?
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So computer science, you can study in a few different places, but again, it depends on what you want to do with it. So it's good that you sort of thought, okay, software is maybe the direction you want to go. So I would look into a university computer science program. There are also, though, depending on, the programs also, if you go to the website, say for the University of Manitoba Computer Science, they'll tell you what some of the typical career outcomes are. Because there are also a lot of different kinds of computer science programs in college as well, but they're sometimes more specific, like web development, as opposed to, say, learning like every programming language. So university or college, if you do computer science in university, there's a lot more math involved because it's sort of like learning how software is built from the ground up. So it tends to have a lot more, like sometimes there's options for like robotics, learning all these different like software languages. Yeah, but you have multiple options, but you can get a degree in computer science from university. And then there's tons of programs in college too. Oh, great question. Where do I learn to manage a business or a company? Lots of different places will offer that. You can do like a business administration certificate in college. That would be a way to learn to manage a business or a company. Sometimes though, you might do that and then also try to find a job over the summer where you're learning on the ground from someone who currently manages a business or a company. I would say, Mason, like becoming a store operator is very similar to managing a business or a company. Again, sometimes business administration is a common name for college programs. You can also take a university program in business, but they're typically longer. So depending on how long you'd like to spend in the school, say 2 or 3 years versus 4 years, that might help you decide college versus university. Let me think, where else? Manage a business or company. I mean, there are also like shorter term training programs that might be like an introduction to business management. But if you are thinking one day that you either want to run your own company or, eventually work your way up to, to being a manager of some kind, a college program like business administration could probably help you on that path, I would say. And similar for store operator. It depends on, sometimes people want to learn specifically about things like shipping, like how do products travel around the world? How do I source things? Like that's an element of running a store. And there's literally programs for almost everything, but start with business administration in college, I would say. Anyone else? A lot of this also, I will say, is Googling. I Google my own job all day long because a student could come to me, and I work with thousands of students, and they could say, I want to know about this job. And I have not heard of every single job. So a lot of the time I help people with Googling. So the questions that you have asked me in the chat, you can also ask them to the internet as a way of doing a little bit of your own research as well to get you started, right? And then you may need help from someone like Queenie or other people, teachers, family members in figuring out what to do with the information that you find. But honestly, just a Google search of how do I become a hairstylist can be a great place to start. Because if I didn't know, that's where I would start. When someone comes to me and says, how do I become a caseworker? If I don't know that, I look it up on Google and then then we talk about the results together. I'm going to move on a little bit, but we'll have more time for questions. I don't have a ton and more, I guess, like heavy information left, except for this slide, which does have lots of words. So something else I want you to keep in mind is that your experience as a student is going to be really different after high school compared to being in high school. And it's something you want to think about to sort of set yourself up for success when you are doing a training program or in college or university or, whatever kind of learning you're continuing to do after. So there's a few really big differences between high school and post-secondary education. And it's good to think about, okay, how will I deal with those differences? How will I still excel and get support, in these different environments? So we'll start with structure. So in high school, you tend to have a lot of structure. You're typically in classes all day, Monday to Friday, oftentimes in one building where your schedule has been given to you and you see the same teachers at the same times every day. So it's very structured. In college and university, it's a little bit less structure. So perhaps in college, you might have some classes you have to attend different times throughout the week, but it's not going to be 9 to 5 all day. So you'll have to sort of learn to organize your time differently. And then in university, you have even less structure. You choose the classes you'd like to take on the days and times that you'd like. And the classes are typically in different buildings. So you're often having to also navigate, 5 different buildings, because your classes might be all over the place. So something to keep in mind is that you have a lot of structure now. You're going to have a little bit less structure depending on the program you choose afterwards. Managing your time and assignments is really different as well when you leave high school. So in high school and things like Future Leaders, there's lots of assignments, tests, quizzes, and projects each term. You don't necessarily just have one big project at the end. They come up pretty regularly, and your teacher probably reminds you of deadlines all the time. You have lots of reminders and people asking, are you done yet? In college and university, you typically have a lot less assignments, like maybe 1 to 4 big assignments for the entire semester, and you have to manage your own time. There's not necessarily people who are going to check in with you to say, how is that project coming along? Are you going to be done on time? You have to manage your own time, and you also have to communicate if you need help. You have to advocate for yourself, because typically in these post-secondary education environments, there's not necessarily always going to be someone checking in with you. So you have to learn to check in with yourself and then reach out if you need help. And that can be pretty different. And then, that sort of moves on to the last point about how it's the relationship with your teachers and instructors is different. So, right now in high school and in programs like OLI, you probably have a lot of contact with your teachers. You might talk to them either every day or multiple times a week, and they're asking if you need help and they're checking in with you. But in post-secondary, if you need help with assignments or with your mental health, or you need to know where the gym is, or you'd like to join a club, you have to do all of that outreach yourself. So it's the responsibility to sort of advocate falls to you in a different way than high school. So it's something to keep in mind, because you will need help and you will have questions, and people are there to do that, but you have to ask a lot of the time, as opposed to waiting for someone to come to you. So the last thing I have is kind of like a quiz. I have created some scenarios, some imaginary people who have particular goals, particular learning styles, or particular needs in terms of their education. And I would love for you to tell me what kind of training program you think might be suitable for them. So we'll look at the first one together. So Leonard, my imaginary friend, wants to become an electrician. What kind of program do you think he needs to take? I'll put the options in the chat in case you forget. These are your options. So if Leonard wants to become an electrician, what kind of program does he need to pursue? What is your best guess? Yes, ding, 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 apprenticeship. He will need to pursue an apprenticeship if he wants to become an electrician. Awesome. Okay, the next one. Ashley has the goal of becoming a lawyer and is looking for cultural supports and to meet other Indigenous students through her school. So she wants to become a lawyer, and she has specific, I guess, desires and requirements in terms of what she wants her school to be like. If she wants to become a lawyer, what kind of school do you think that she has to go to? Yes. University. You are all correct. So to become a lawyer, you have to have a 4-year bachelor degree in any subject, and then you have to go to law school for 2 years after. So becoming a lawyer is 6 years of university. And then in terms of discovering like cultural supports, you would want to do research on the school to find out what's available ahead of time. Usually those are called student services. Like that's the department that provides that kind of service. Okay, the next one. Alex wants to work in a daycare or school with young children. They would like to be in school for no more than 3 years, and they learn best through direct practice, like hands-on learning. Where do you think that Alex would go to become qualified to work in a daycare or with young children? Yes, college. Fantastic. So very commonly, if people want to work with young children, they can do an early childhood education program. Now, some universities have those, but Alex only wants to study for 3 years or less. So an early education, an early childhood program in a college would probably suit them better. Okay, Jamie wants to improve the buildings in their community. They would like to learn to design buildings to make them energy efficient and sustainable. Where do you think someone has to go if they want to design buildings, especially if they're thinking about sustainability? Any guesses? So they don't want to build the building necessarily, they want to design it. So create the plans, they want to think about the shape of the building and just like the design of it, how it will blend with the environment. Any guesses as to where they might have to go to school to learn to do that? Let's give it 10 more seconds for your guesses and then I'll tell you. Okay, that's a good guess. In this case, probably not a training program. Training programs tend to be a little shorter and lead directly, they might lead directly to a job. Okay, an architect. So in this case, actually probably not college. If you want to be someone that actually designs the buildings, not the person who makes the drawings or actually builds the buildings, you are probably looking at a university, a 4-year university degree in architecture or engineering. Now, if you want to be the person who actually does the drawings for the building or helps to actually build it, that stuff can all be done in college. But if you want to actually make the design and think about making it energy efficient and stuff, that would be an architecture or engineering degree. Good guesses though. Okay, one more slide of this. Let's see about this one. Tasha wants to drive heavy equipment, but needs a flexible training schedule because of her family responsibilities. Where do you think that Tasha could learn to drive heavy equipment while also being able to take care of her family responsibilities? Okay, college is a good guess. Typically, the courses wouldn't be that long. Yeah, other training program is a big category, but in this case, you can learn to drive heavy equipment often through, say, like a 6-month training program through either like an employment service program or an Indigenous Education Institute. So for example, like I mentioned, the one in Thunder Bay, Oshki Wenjack, they offer like training to drive heavy equipment. And the great thing about some of these programs is they often do like 2 weeks in the program and then 2 weeks back home. So they have flexible schedules for people who have family responsibilities. So you're not studying, 5 days a week for 6 months straight. You do 2 weeks studying and then 2 weeks at home. Okay, so Star wants to pursue graphic design and digital art and is really interested in connecting with like-minded people to advocate for social justice issues that she cares about. This one does, I will admit, have a couple of answers. So yes, university is one. Any other thoughts on where they might learn? Thinking about the fact that they want to connect with lots of people. So they want to learn and be in class, but they also want to meet a lot of people. So university is absolutely correct. You can also do graphic design, digital art in college. Yeah, for sure, Kaden, thanks. The reason I say university or college is that if you're looking to meet a lot of people and get involved like this person in social justice and advocacy, you can find a lot of those groups and like-minded people in a big school like a university or college, as opposed to maybe a very small training program. Okay, second last one. Mark loves learning about human behavior and has other interests in history and creative writing. So Okay, we have a very fast guess. University, that is correct. So if you want to, delve really deeply into one or two subjects and you don't necessarily have a particular career goal right away, university can be a great way to dive really deep into something. So in this case, Mark might choose to study psychology, English, history, or just a general arts program where you get to take a whole bunch of different classes. Okay, and then the last one, Matthew learns best when he can ask lots of questions to his teachers, has smaller class sizes, and gets frequent feedback on his work. He also wants to search for a job within 3 years. So in this case, Matthew doesn't have a particular career goal in mind or particular interest. He just knows himself and he knows how he wants to learn and he knows a little bit about his personal timeline. So where do you think he might want to go? Yeah, college for sure. College is probably a better choice for someone like Matthew. Smaller classes and typically shorter programs. He could complete a program and get a certificate within 3 years for sure. So it's okay if you don't know exactly what you'd like to study, but if you know yourself, that can be your first step for your research. Like if you're someone who's super independent and you know that you want to, you're thinking about 4 years of school is very exciting to you, look into university. But if you want to be working within 6 months or a year, maybe a training program. So think about who you are and how you learn, and that can also guide you just as much as your interests or your career goals. Any questions about any of these? Thank you everyone for participating and your amazing guesses. I feel like you totally nailed it by the end there. So of course, you've taken in all this information. Maybe you Googled something. Who can you talk to about your educational decisions? Any thoughts? Who can you talk to? As you're thinking about what you might want to do after high school, who could help you make decisions? Who could help you understand what you might learn online? Oh, yes, Queenie and your teachers. Those are excellent people to talk to. Those would be on my list. Anyone else? This is going to be
Our
personal.
mentors.
Your mentors, absolutely. That's also on my list. And again, this is personal to each person. Everyone has different people in their life that they go to, to talk about different things. So I have on my list family members, teachers and community members, OLI staff. You can also contact the programs directly. They have people called admissions officers that their whole job is to teach you about what the programs are and how you apply and how that whole process works. And then of course your mentors. So these are all great people to talk to. And of course, if you're still in the very early stages of thinking, talking to someone like Queenie and a mentor is great. If you've decided I want to study this specific thing, then maybe talking to someone at a training program would be your next step. And then this is my last thing before I have kind of an image to share with everyone. So where can you find more information? I already mentioned Google. Please Google things. Just start with your big open-ended questions and then see what kind of results come up and talk about the results, with people in your life. You can also, just look up different training programs or colleges and universities like in your province or close to your community or somewhere you'd like to travel to. Like if you really want to study in BC, for example, look up and see what kind of programs they have out there. Also, tribal councils and the different territorial organizations have a lot of information about education and training as well. So those websites can be helpful too. Inspire is a really helpful organization for supporting Indigenous students with post-secondary education in terms of both information and funding. So a very good organization to look up. If you know anyone who's ever done any kind of post-secondary training or education, talk to them. Ask them about their experience, ask them about how they decided what to do, what the process to apply was like. Getting that firsthand information can be really helpful. And then if you have a guidance counselor at your school, not everyone does, that person can help, but it's just as good to talk to someone like Queenie and your teachers as well. Okay, I have this image. I just threw it in there to see if it would generate conversation. We've sort of come to the end of the information I wanted to share for tonight, and I can hang around a bit to see if there's any more questions, but I'm just curious, what do you think that these two images might represent? We'll label them A and B. Any thoughts on what these images might represent or how you feel when you look at them? Or if you were to label them, what you might label them? Any ideas? Queen, does anything pop up for you when you see these? Like what you might call these images or how they might make you feel?
Are you asking me? Sorry.
Yeah, just
Oh.
curious. Do you have any thoughts on these images, what they bring up for
Um,
you or how you might label them?
For me personally, it was actually what I thought a career would be like growing up. So, like the A section, I thought that was like the way to do things. I thought that was the only way that you can get things done, meaning like you go step by step and you can't attain the dream job until you get to college, get your first job, and whatnot. But B is actually more of what my life has been like, more of a reality where everything's always changing. Just when you think this is the direction you want to take, like mine pivots right away. So A, I would say, was like my expectation of like what a career would be like. And B is like the reality of how my career's been like. Yeah.
Yes, my life has also been similar in terms of the image of B. Actually, there are some amazing comments. Evan wrote expectations in the chat. So, oh, there's some really good reflection. So sorry, I muted somehow.
I muted you. That was me. I'm sorry. I was going to mute myself, but
all good. So some great comments in the chat. I see the progress of life, expectations. Sometimes I might call that expectations versus reality. Oh, Caden says A feels like you know what you want to do. You know what? Maybe if we took A and made it one small step on the whole progress of your life, like if you thought about A like achieving one small goal, but it's not your entire life. So maybe you know what to do within the next 6 months or within the next year. And that's a great place to start. You certainly don't have to know what comes up after that. B feels like your brain. I can relate to that. Sometimes brains are muddled places, but I just wanted to share this with you because B is really what is kind of normal. You can't predict what's going to happen 5 or 10 years from now. What you can do though, is take the information you have about yourself and think a few steps ahead. Right? So setting sort of, some shorter term goals for yourself and thinking, okay, what's the plan I want to make so I have somewhere to go right after high school? You don't have to figure out what happens, like far after that, because you just can't predict it. You can't predict what you'll learn in any of those programs that might spark a new interest. You can't predict who you'll meet. You can't predict what kinds of, jobs you might take on or volunteer opportunities. So, B sometimes looks kind of jumbled and scary, but it's just because our life has so many forces that end up having you change direction, and that's normal. Like I started out studying dance because I loved dance. And then through my dance degree, I learned that I loved education. And then I was like, how do I combine the two? And then I became an artist educator. And then, I took some random courses here and there. I ended up taking a part-time job that turned into a full-time job. I started, I met some people from OLI by accident. Like you just can't necessarily plan for all these things, but what you can do is think, who am I right now? What do I want to learn? What kind of environment might have me at my best? And, what's my short-term plan? So sometimes A feels like that's what you have to do to be successful, but A is not, necessarily a good representation of real life. So embrace B, just embrace the chaos a little bit, and all the different directions that your life will take. So that is that. I'm sorry, Queenie, it's 7:30 on the dot. I don't know if there's any questions, but I'm happy if there's anything else anyone wants to know or comment on, I can hang around for a couple of minutes.
Yeah. If there are any specific questions, feel free to chat. If you do have to go, I understand. You can also go, but I would just like to say a big thank you to Laura. Yay. Thank you so much for all that information. I hope everybody was able to kind of reflect a little bit on it and like start really thinking about their future. I know for a lot of us, a lot of the words that came up today, maybe like college, university, like we've heard them before, but we've never really just like had a time to just sit down and talk about it and learn about them. So it's okay if coming in here, you were like, what? I'm not sure. The idea of today is just to get the gears going. And already just by like our conversations, I can already tell that all of you are asking such great questions to start this journey of like, what do I want to do in the future? And I just want to assure you that like in the future, these are the things that we're going to be touching. These are the things that we're going to be exploring more, specifically with your mentor, right? So we're going to be researching these specific things that you've asked. So like, remember all of this, maybe even after our call, just quickly write down all your thoughts. Remember like length of time. What do I want in my like training program? Like what works best for me? Like all of those things, just like start thinking about that and writing them down in your reflection journals. And then that will be our starting point with your mentors next time. So if you're overwhelmed, no worries. Those are the things we're going to kind of like help you with throughout this program. Yeah.